It's finally Friday. It's Friday, Friday.
Thank God it's
All right, welcome back to the Friday Show, presented this week by NYRA's loyalty program, providing bonuses to horsemen racing in New York. I'm Scott Jagow, along with Ray Paulick. Ray, hard to believe, but it's only 1 week until the Kentucky Derby, so guess what we're going to talk about? We've broken it into segments based on the prep races, so I'm going to just get the ball rolling here with what to you was the most impressive performance?
Well, there were many impressive performances, mostly because the horses that you expected to run big did run big. But no one ran bigger than Mendelssohn when he won the UAE Derby for Aidan O'Brien. I mean, this was just a breathtaking performance. He's got the breeding. You know, this is the Into Mischief beholder half-brother. He's by Scat Daddy, who's got 4 horses in the field for this year's Derby. Mendelssohn's performance was just amazing to me.
I'm going to go with Mendelssohn. He won by almost 19 lengths. It's hard to deny that. I don't care about the rail bias. You just don't see horses win by 19. And he set a record. And the horse that he beat, the filly, that second place filly, Rhea, she's pretty good. And guess who says that? Bob Baffert, her new trainer, who's taking her to the Oaks. So she just complimented Mendelssohn, as Baffert just did. And so I think, yeah, I've got to agree. That was the most impressive performance.
All right. Who was your most disappointing performance turned in by this year in the big preps?
I'm going to say Promises Fulfilled. And it's not really the horse's fault. It's the jockey's fault. Robbie Alvarado in the Florida Derby went out in 21 and change at a 1.125 distance. You just don't do that. The horse lost by 35 because of that. How could you help it when you go out that fast? I think this colt is much more talented than it appeared in that race, losing by 35. And in fact, Dale Roman says he's going to go to the lead in the Derby. Come catch him. And I think if you get softer fractions, you might want to watch out. Who's yours?
Well, mine is Enticed. When I saw this horse before the Holy Bull Stakes earlier this year, I just thought, man, this is a beautiful animal. He had good form. I thought he was going to run huge. He really ran flat that day. Then Karen McLaughlin shipped him to New York for the Gotham, which he won fairly impressively. But then he came back to Florida, then he shipped back to New York for the Wood. Maybe it was the shipping back and forth. Maybe he's just not that good, but I thought his Wood Memorial performance, second to Vino Rosso, was just kind of, you know, not a good second. I just thought he kind of threw in the towel too easily. And he's not, I'm off him as far as having a chance to win the Derby.
Okay, so what was the strongest prep, in your opinion?
Well, maybe not the deepest field, but I thought the top 2 finishers are maybe the best 2 horses in this year's Kentucky Derby field, and that's the Santa Anita Derby. Justify got the easy lead, controlled the pace, and won pretty easily. And Bolt Doro, who I still think was the best 2-year-old last year, tried to make a race of it, got to the top of the stretch, put some pressure on, and just couldn't keep up. I think those 2 are the best 2 horses going into the Kentucky Derby.
And the Santa Anita Derby is always influential, and so is the Arkansas Derby, which is my choice for strongest prep. Looking at the depth of that field, Magnum Moon won by 4 lengths, but the horses he beat, Quip had already had enough Derby points and has decided not to go. Combatant is in the Derby. He's there. There were a couple of other horses in the field with Derby points. I just think top to bottom, that was probably the strongest.
What about the weakest prep of the 100-point races? Which one was the weakest, do you think?
I'm going to stick with my evaluation of the field and say the Wood Memorial, which it's been a long time since the winner of the Derby has come out of New York. And I'm not sure it's going to be the case this year, but although I do like the winner more than the rest of that field, which wasn't much beyond Enticed. So that's what I'm going with.
And to me, the Louisiana Derby traditionally has been a weak race, and I look at this year's field and kind of say the same thing. Noble Indy was a good winner of the race, but as of midweek, he didn't even have a jockey named for Todd Pletcher. So I just think he's coming out of that race as not one of the favorites for the Kentucky Derby. And again, traditionally, the Louisiana Derby has not been a strong prep leading up to the Kentucky Derby.
So who is the horse you think is being underrated heading into the Derby?
Well, I'm going to go back to the Santa Anita Derby and say Bolt d'Oro. He won the San Felipe via disqualification of McKenzie, who was since injured. Bob Baffert said McKenzie was his best 2-year-old or best 3-year-old this year. And the fact that Bolt d'Oro ran so well against him, they finished heads apart in that race. And then he came back, and I thought he ran a really big race against Justify. If there's more pace in the race, I think Bolt d'Oro is going to be a pretty good price for a horse that's never really run a bad race. Who you got?
I'm going to say Audible is being a little bit underrated, only because you have the eye-popping performance of Mendelssohn, Justify, who clearly is talented off the charts, Magnum Moon, also undefeated, also clearly talented. These horses running off in the prep races. And I think, everybody seems to be talking about those and not as much about Audible's win in the Florida Derby because it was pace aided, as we mentioned earlier, where they went too fast early. So maybe people are discounting it a little bit. I still think, the Florida Derby is always right there when you talk about the preps heading into the Florida, last year's winner, Always Dreaming, for example. So Audible, I think, is a little bit underrated.
How about overrated? I'll tell you my overrated horse.
Okay.
Magnum Moon. I did not like the way I know it was fast and all that. I did not like the way he won the Arkansas Derby, drifting out. I just wasn't that impressed by his race. And I know he's unbeaten. He's part of the Todd squad. And he's going to be, Pletcher's got a strong hand this year. But I think of the four, between him and Noble Indy have the least chance of winning for Pletcher.
I guess I'm going to say Good Magic is a little bit overrated because I didn't think that was a strong Bluegrass Stakes, and the times weren't very good in terms of the way they came home, and it hasn't really been that influential on the Derby. And if he pulls back to that juvenile performance that he had last year, that's a different story. I don't know how often horses do that, kind of pull back to a performance from the year before and get up to that level. I think he's good. I had to make a choice, and my choice is Good Magic. How about a sleeper?
To me, the sleeper is Hofburg. Bill Mott has a Hall of Fame career. There's one big race he hasn't won. It's the Kentucky Derby, in part because he's a conservative horseman. He doesn't push horses to go to the Derby. This horse went into the Florida Derby, finished second off of just a maiden win, which is very unusual for Mott and for the owners of the horse, Juddmonte Farms. And as soon as the race was over, Bill just said, I saw nothing there that's discouraging me from going to the Kentucky Derby. So it's onward and upward for him. I think this is an improving colt. He's by Tappet. I think he's going to be tough.
You know what I think he's going to be? The wise guy.
Okay.
But we'll see. I'll go with Lone Sailor as a sleeper. He ran very well in the Louisiana Derby, even though that might not have been the strongest prep. And he's a closer in a field that seemingly has quite a bit of tactical speed, at least. They could be going pretty fast. And, everybody's talking about My Boy Jack as the closer. Watch out for Lone Sailor, who has been training over the Churchill surface for weeks and blazing over it. So look out for him late in the Derby. All right, so we have a poll question around this. What, to you, was the strongest performance of the major prep races? Take our poll on the website, PaulickReport.com. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of the Friday Show. We will talk to you next week from Louisville. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.